2020. Call to order at 7:37 p.m. Councilmember Lingua is having some technical difficulties, which should be joining us shortly. Members of the council, you have a draft agenda before you. Are there any amendments required to that agenda? And do you have any conflicts of interest for any of the agenda items? I see no microphones opening up. And so I'll assume that that means that everything is good. So if I might have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Kellogg to approve the agenda as submitted. Is there any discussion of this motion by the council? Are there any public comments on the motion to approve the agenda as submitted? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Kellogg.
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 4-0. Councilmember Lingua is still not with us. Is that correct? Okay, don't see him. Okay, first item on the agenda, past approval is public comments. Are there any public comments this evening? I don't see any microphones opening up or hands being raised. I'll assume that means no. Let's move immediately to legislative action items. Item number 1 is introduction of ordinance 2024-OR-11 regarding the 2025 town election. If staff could provide a brief overview before the introduction.
Director Barnes.
Good evening, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. This ordinance sets the date, time, and location of the 2025 town election. It also provides for early voting. It also provides for compensation for the Board of Elections serving as election judges. So it's kind of the starting point for the 2025 election. So we're asking that it's introduced tonight and then adopted at the January 6th meeting, which is consistent with the new timeline established by the recent charter amendment.
Okay. So is there a council member who would like to introduce this ordinance? Remember, we will not be discussing or making a motion, just introducing it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Foe.
I'd like to introduce ordinance 2024-OR-11 regarding town elections, setting the date, setting a variety of other things that were just stated regarding the payment of, that was funny, of elected officials and continuing the good work of town staff in embracing early voting and allowing our residents to have the fullest opportunity to vote.
Thank you for that introduction, Councilmember. So we can now move on to legislative action item number 2, motion to adopt the schedule for the town manager performance review. I distributed this at the December 2nd meeting for review, and I would like to have a motion to adopt that schedule, and then we can discuss any changes that might be needed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Inyang, I believe. I was trying to watch the microphones there. Please correct me if that's not the case. Can we get the schedule up on screen, please?
Legislative action item number 2, Keith.
It would just be a moment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
One moment, still looking for.
Okay, so I did not receive any comments on this. Uh, the schedule is substantially the same as in previous years. I will be submitting evaluation forms early in January, receiving feedback before the legislative meeting if you have any changes from last year's, but otherwise the form will be essentially the same. I might change the wording a little bit if people seemed confused about a particular evaluation section. And then setting the schedule for when I will accept the comments and compile them into a report and how we will meet to decide on the final construction. And everything should be wrapped up by the middle of March, according to this schedule. Except there's a possible setting of annual goals for the town manager that could happen as late as the last calendar day in April. So that is what the schedule is. Council members, do you have any discussion about the schedule? Any questions, comments, changes you wish to see?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Foe?
no need to mess with a good thing. This is a process that we've established for an extended period under this town manager. And I think it still serves that singular purpose of giving us the opportunity to comment and praise and whatever we want to do. And I think that it is good moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Are there any public comments on the motion to adopt the schedule for the town manager performance review? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
Councilmember Kellogg.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda is new business. Are there any items of new business? Doesn't look like it. Are there any items of unfinished business? No one's unmuting their microphone. I'll assume that's a no also. May I please have a motion to adjourn the special legislative meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Foe to adjourn. We neither debate nor discuss this item. Simply go to a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
Councilmember Kellogg.
Aye.
And I abstain. Motion passes. We are adjourned at 7:45 p.m. That brings us to the work session. Work session is a much less formal meeting where we discuss items before they come before the council. And so I'll call this meeting to order at 7:46, just barely p.m. It's as I said, it's much less formal. Does anything need to be corrected on the agenda, or does everything look okay to everyone?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Smith.
could we add update on 6601 Baltimore Avenue to unfinished business, please?
Sure. Please help me remember it when we get there. I'm going to try to type it in here.
I'll remind you.
Okay, very good. Okay, so that brings us to presentations. Then fiscal year 2026 budget assumptions is the first presentation.
Deputy Director Jones is going to share with us this evening on that. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Yes, so tonight's presentation is on fiscal year 2026 budget assumptions.
There's a PowerPoint that'll be coming up here in a moment.
Thank you. So yes, the budget committee has developed budget assumptions. We have 15 different categories. And as the staff budget committee and staff leadership team build the proposed budget, the assumptions may have to be adjusted. So the key points considered for fiscal year 2026 budget assumptions are revenue stability and adjustments, expenditure growth, funding and long-term planning, final assessments and economic uncertainty, political uncertainties, and last, strategic growth. The next slide shows the broad categories at this stage of the budget development. And then I'll go into detail for each of these, but we have the general fund, unassigned reserve, real property tax rate, business personal tax rate, operating tax rate, admission and amusement tax rate, fee schedule, debt service, healthcare benefits, health and wellness fund, economic development fund, accessible base, OPEB, authorized number of positions, pay range plan and COLA, and lastly, operating revenue expenditures and CIP. So fiscal year 2026 assumptions, general fund, unassigned reserve. The town will maintain a minimum general fund unassigned reserve balance of 3.5 million to ensure financial stability and flexibility. The general fund unassigned reserve, the GFOA recommends that the general fund assigned reserve be at least 16.67%. So the town continues to exceed this minimum recommendation, and the assumption here is that we will continue to do so. The next assumption for fiscal year 2026 real property tax is that the assessable base value for home property tax is expected to remain stable. However, if property values contract, the tax rate may need to be adjusted to maintain revenue stability. Final assessments will not be available until February 2025. The next assumption is business personal property tax rate. The current rate of $2 per $100 of assessed value will remain unchanged. Fiscal year 2026 assumptions for the operating public utility tax. The current rate of $2 per $100 of assessed value remains in effect, though we do have a consideration for a moderate increase if necessary. The next assumption is admissions and amusement tax rate. The current rate of 5% of gross receipts for eligible activities will remain unchanged. Next assumption is the fee schedule. So we have the rental licensing and inspection. This includes fees for inspections and licensing of rental properties, including multifamily units. No changes are anticipated to the current fee structure. Also included here is the business licensing. No significant changes are anticipated for business licensing fees. However, a moderate increase may apply if necessary to align with operational costs. Administrative fees. This covers special cleanup fees and other administrative charges, and a moderate increase may apply. We have fines and forfeitures. This includes revenue from police reports, vehicle impounds, parking violations, and MVA flag fees. Here, a moderate increase may apply if necessary to align with operational costs. And lastly are the parking permits. Here we have fees for resident and visitor parking permits. And these will remain stable with potential minor adjustments based on demand or administrative costs. The next budget assumption is for debt service. And the assumption here is that no new debt will be incurred. For fiscal year 2026 healthcare benefits, the assumption here is there will be an increase in healthcare benefit rates and costs may also rise due to qualifying events. For the Health and Wellness Fund, funding for the Health and Wellness Fund will be increased to support enhanced employee well-being initiatives. So yes, the assumption here is that there will be a rise in an increase in the Health and Wellness Fund. Fiscal year 2026 Economic Development Fund. The assumption here is that the Economic Development Fund will rely on general fund and potential grants as primary funding sources. Next, we have the accessible base. The assumptions here are that incremental growth in the accessible base is expected. There will be no construction for fiscal year 2026, and that new property values will take effect on July 1st, 2025. Budget assumptions for the Calvert track and the accessible base are that we have incremental growth in the accessible base for the Calvert track. No new construction will be added for fiscal year 2026, and updated property values will take effect on July 1st, 2025. Next, we have OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. The assumption here is that funding for OPEB will be increased to address future liabilities and support retiree benefits. Next, for budget assumptions, we have the pay range plan and the cost of living adjustment. The assumption here is that a cost of living adjustment will be applied to all staff positions to address inflation and maintain competitive compensation. Next assumption is for authorized number of positions. The assumption here is that the authorized number of positions will be increased by adding one additional support position to enhance operational efficiency. So the next portion of the presentation involves the operating revenues and expenditures. And here we have a summary of the operating revenue assumptions. First being that real property tax rates. The final assessments are expected in February 2025, and any changes will be based on those results. For business personal property tax rates, no changes to the current rate. For operating public utility property tax rates, a moderate increase may be considered if necessary. For admissions and amusement tax rates, no changes to the current rate. For fee schedules, potential adjustments may be made to specific fees. And lastly, for automated enforcement, potential changes may impact revenue generation. Next, we have budget assumptions regarding the operating expenditures. So first, adjustments will be made to account for changes in the cost of goods, services, and overall operational expenditures. Variable costs are projected to increase, driven by inflation and supply chain challenges. And lastly, rising costs of materials, labor, and other operational expenses are anticipated due to ongoing inflationary pressures. So for fiscal year 2026, capital improvement program assumptions, or CIP, the assumptions here are that additional funding is required. Capital improvement projects will require supplemental funding to meet planned objectives. Additionally, grant funding efforts will focus on securing grant funding to offset costs and support project initiatives. We also have pay-go financing, which is pay-as-you-go financing, and this will be utilized where feasible to fund projects without incurring additional debt. So the main takeaway for fiscal year 2026 assumptions is uncertainty. As we move forward in the budget process, the assumption here is that there is a bit of uncertainty as we move forward. And this will certainly be taken into consideration as we proceed with the budget process. And at this point, I will open up the floor for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Council members, do you have questions or comments for the Deputy Director?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Lingua, you had your microphone open first, so go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Jones, we've been hearing year after year about the takeaway being uncertainty. And again, we're getting a very kind of broad explanation. Taking that with the slide on budget assumption operating expenditures. Three statements here without any numbers or projections as to what you're seeing, these increases as being, and where we're really being hit by supply chain challenges. Is there insight you can share with the council on these points?
Yeah, sure. So we are still fairly early in the budget process. So we still have a lot of analysis that we need to do. We're still getting some numbers back in regard to health insurance. That's one, workers' comp and things of that nature. But at this point, we do know that, there is a triennial assessment that should be coming up, as well as new administration. So when it comes to uncertainty, at this point in the budget process, while it's still very early, we're just bringing it to your attention as we do move forward. But yet, as far as flat numbers, we don't have that right now at this point of the budget. But the assumptions are that there is a lot of uncertainty as we move forward, and as we continue to present and update you with budget updates, we will have a more clear vision of what the numbers are going to look like.
Mr. Mayor, can I add?
Please go ahead. I was about to jump in, but I think you probably had more to say about it than I do. So go ahead.
I'll be a little more direct as it relates to potential changes. Recently, I read an article where Virginia, as a state, the governor is implementing a plan where if municipalities or counties have policies that limit cooperation with immigration authorities, that they would not receive any state funding. While I don't believe we have that concern as it relates to the state of Maryland, I think that policy very well may be adopted on the federal level. And we should be prepared financially to not necessarily receive federal support. There's also discussion in the media about reducing the size of the federal footprint in terms of workforce. We have a line item where we rely for our operations, and Mr. Jones helped me out here on the number, but we rely on the town's portion of state income tax. There's a portion of income tax which is shared. And for a long time, it had been a couple $100,000. I think now, Mr. Jones, do you recall how much that is now that we rely upon?
I have it right here. Give me one sec. Close to 7.6 million.
No, not all of local taxes, just our share of income tax.
Oh, I can get that number. Give me one sec.
Yeah, it should be, I think it's around 900.
900 even. Yep.
It's 900 even. Okay.
Mhm.
But if there is an effort, 18 months from now, we may feel that, or a year from now, in the second half of our next budget, we may feel that. And we actually have a line item that may be impacted by that. So change in administration, change in policy, can very well impact our revenue sources. On the cost side, I think the term some economists use for some cost increases, the prices are sticky, and they don't necessarily come back down as quickly as they rise. And we see that as it relates to CIP projects. We've seen increases back in March of 2020. Things started with supply chain issues. Prices went up. Prices have come down on some issues, not on some items, not on others. But depending on policy, we may see increases in cost of just daily goods. Our residents may see increases in cost, and the town will see its share of cost increases for operating as well. So I actually would, and I've talked with Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones about this fairly extensively. I think it's safe to say the three of us would say we're more uncertain as we head into this budget than we were when we were hit with COVID. And there's just a lot to consider here. There's policy issues that have really significant issues and potential impact. There's what we're still dealing with supply chain, and then increased cost. The healthcare, just to remind the council, Director Smith had negotiated with our healthcare provider that we had the same rate locked in for 2 years. That's expired. So we're back to negotiating new rates. And so we know that it's going to increase. The question is it going to be a 10, 15, or 20% increase? And after having a rate locked for 2 years, I would say it's going to be north of 10, most likely in the 15 range. And 15% of a couple $100,000, it's a lot of money. So yes, we have uncertainty. And as things get clearer, we will share all the information that we receive. But I think uncertainty is the only way to describe things as we enter this budget. And then our largest revenue source, Mr. Jones mentioned with the triennial reassessment. We believe there's every reason to anticipate some incremental growth. But in previous years, we've seen some contractions during the triennial reassessment. And so we're waiting to see what the state says about the town's assessable base. So not doomsday, but certainly not, oh, this is going to be an easy budget process. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I was going to mention the uncertainty of the triennial assessment. You know, that's a big uncertainty, and that we don't know what's going to happen. Are there, Councilmember Lingwood, do you have additional questions?
No, I don't have any additional questions. I appreciate, a more thorough, in-depth going into explaining, what types of uncertainties and the degree to which they could affect us. I appreciate that. I feel in the future this needs to be part of this, part of this presentation, so that we know going forward what information we're going to be getting filled in for us in ensuing meetings.
And point taken, sir.
Okay, additional council questions or comments? Someone else did open their mic, I know. Looks like nobody else on the council. Councilmember Foe, do you have a question?
I had one, but the explanation was thorough enough that it answered the two that I had.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Foe, go ahead.
Yes, I just had a question about the 3.5 million in reserves. I thought I heard that the recommended percentage was 16.6. Is that 3.5 in reserve over the 16.6 recommended?
Yes, by a good bit.
Okay, thank you.
The recommended is actually the floor. The state will come and take us over if we don't have that much in reserve.
And I'm not advocating utilizing that in any way. I'm just, when you hear of potential federal reservation and giving us monies, you just wonder, how do you stop the flow of blood occasionally,
Sure, and it's good to have that reserve. I certainly when in the spring of 2020, I was very happy we had a significant excess reserve so that we could respond to the pandemic as it occurred. Okay, additional council questions or comments? Okay, any public questions or comments on this presentation? Not seeing any hands or microphones, so let's move on to the next presentation, current capital improvement project pipeline.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm pinch hitting tonight for this. And so we'll wait until we have there we go. Presentation pulled up. There's the town's new seal. Looks good. And so tonight I wanted to take a little bit of time, and Ivy just wasn't able to join us tonight. So, but she's put together a PowerPoint for us, and I think I can walk through this. If there's very specific questions, I may have to get back to the council. I may not have her level of detail at my fingertips. But wanted to talk about the pipeline. And so when we look at this next slide, we see that we have 35 capital improvements. And so 25 of those were projects, 10 of those are acquisitions. And on our projects, we work hard to make them visible and impactful. And you can see that we have these different categories of projects: community, building, technology, public safety, streetlight acquisitions, and road and sidewalk construction. But when we think about pipelines on this next slide, I think oftentimes that might be what comes to mind. Nice straight line crossed to the horizon. Sun's not shining there, but nice grassy area. Everything's kind of smooth sailing. And this may be what folks think of as a pipeline. But the tail of a project pipeline, as we see on this next slide, is much more complicated. This is more of the type of pipeline that staff deal with and encounter. So there's valves that we have no control over. If you look closely, you see little pressure gauges. And we believe we know the processes, and we study the processes, and our engineers do the same, and our contractors do. And but then sometimes you're moving along, and then somebody throws a switch or turns a valve, and you have to then go in another direction. So project pipelines are not straight lines. It's kind of a misleading thing to think of a pipeline of projects. Well, it just flows, and it really doesn't. And that's not unique to Riverdale Park. So on this next slide, you'll see where we have projects divided up. So we have, maybe make that a little smaller so it fits on the screen better. But we have 6 projects in planning and scoping. We have 11 in project design, 5 in bidding and construction, and we've completed 3 so far this fiscal year. Next slide. So here's the projects, a list of projects that we have, well, we have a couple other slides with lists, but a few things to highlight, and then we'll get into detail on some of these projects. So I wanted to highlight 47 to Taylor Linear Park. We have a target date to be determined. We've run into a snag with some, it's not wetlands back there, but there is a portion that stays wet a good portion of the year. So we've been studying that more carefully to see how it is that we can put a walkway through without having to build a boardwalk. So we don't have a date on that yet, but that's something that we're studying. And we have these list of target dates. I'm not going to read all the target dates. If there's something on there that council members are interested in, let me know. I'll do my best to respond. I did want to point out a couple. Mount Rose, we think we can have a project put together by next summer. The public Wi-Fi is complete. So we have Wi-Fi in our town center. We have Wi-Fi at the food forest and community garden area. The welcome signage, I wanted to highlight something here. So when I mentioned, sometimes you can have a valve that you think you're flowing well on a project, and all of a sudden a valve gets closed. If the mayor and council recall, we had the engineers come in and present designs to you, and you weighed in on the design for the welcome signage. And only to find out months and months later that SHA will not permit the type of design that the engineers put together. And so now they're back to redesigning the welcome signage. And so there was a change in a standard, and so we won't be able to put monument signs along state roads anymore. And so the engineers at no additional cost to the town are redesigning, and we'll be back with a new set of designs for the council to look at and to weigh in on the welcome signage. We've had some challenges with putting things out to bid and getting some bids that were crazy high, or no bids at all, and that's with the bus stop improvements, right? We had super high bids and then no bids, and that's why that one's running late. We're going to cover in detail Adam and Emily Plummer Park, the Tot Lot, and the town center trail and parking lot redesign. Can we go to well, does anybody have questions about anything particular here?
Well, Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the public Wi-Fi in town center, is there currently any signage around town center? I haven't seen any, but I also haven't looked for it. Was just surprised
Jessica,
this was completed in August 24. And maybe I missed something that's entirely possible. But just wanted.
Yeah, Director Barnes.
Certainly, nope, you're right. You're right on the money, Councilman Smith. So we have some finishing touches that we need to put on the Wi-Fi, and specifically in the train station. I'm not sure if you've seen the lovely design that our vendor had chosen. I would like to see something smaller. So we're going to make some small changes to that, and then there will be signage and all sorts of good stuff. So finishing touches are taking a little bit longer, but it's there, and it will be there will be appropriate signage as well.
Awesome. Once we have everything up and running, just a suggestion. But I, certainly trust the town manager to make these decisions. But I think a press release would be good to let folks in town and our neighbors know that they can come and eat their lunch and get their coffee and wait for the train and have free public Wi-Fi.
That
Yes.
sounds great. Absolutely.
And so I concur with you, council member, and Director Barnes will make sure that that occurs.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on or questions specific to this list? If not, Keith, can you go to the next slide? So the municipal center, again, we'll get into detail here in a few minutes, but we're still optimistically pushing for January. We have asked for a partial use and occupancy permit in case things go beyond that. Then the municipal center stormwater management, we're looking at next June. DPW building renovations in 25. The parking lot in August of 25, and we're going to talk in detail about that. And then yet this month, the sidewalk along the DPW yard and the fence along there it's an effort to keep school children and their parents from walking through our DPW yard. And then the council chamber camera system, February of 25. We've installed the neighborhood safety cameras that were approved. And then the street light improvement project, we're looking at the end of the next calendar year. That's for the project along Lafayette. Next slide, Keith. Road construction. So December 26th for Natoli Place redesign. Stormwater at Beale Circle. We're saying the same thing because funding's, or no, we're kicking that out a little. Or no, it's a little earlier. It's June of 26. I'm sorry. And but that's because we're not sure of funding there. We asked for a bond bill on that. And if not, we'll look at the municipal participation the program the county has. And then the CDBG funded sidewalks on 48th. We're going to cover that here in a minute, but that's yet this year. Curb ramp improvements, that's ongoing. Street and sidewalk improvements, that's next September. And then under Walk Bike Drive, we have, now this has the full grant amount, but that includes Edmonston's money, that 910. And then Walk Bike Drive safety improvements. Staff have been working close with the Walk Bike Drive Advisory Committee. We believe that end of January, maybe the legislative meeting in February, the committee will have a recommendation for some additional projects. I don't want to steal their thunder, but that 351 is allocated for projects that are not currently funded that are related to Walk Bike Drive. So, but I believe we'll have a recommendation from the committee at that time. Next slide. So here's the 5 projects that we're going to have some highlights on. Mr. Robinson, if you can go to the next slide, please. So the 54th Place Pocket Park and Tot Lot. If you haven't been by, go by and take a look. We're just waiting for the exterior fence to be complete. So these photos show that the exterior fence is in, we're making progress on it. That's the 4-foot-high black fence that's on the curb, and it's pretty much a non-scalable fence. And the silver fence is the construction fence, and that will go away. And so as soon as that happens, we think that will happen yet this calendar year. Then we'll work with the council to finalize rules, and then we'll organize the ribbon cutting and the park opening ceremony. So it's a nice project, and it's taken a while. We ran into lots of stormwater management issues, and that's been the delay there. Any questions, thoughts, concerns on that project? Mr. Mayor, you have a resident with a hand.
Go ahead, Ms. Katz.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my question, Mr. Town Manager, I was just curious, you mentioned the stormwater management issues. What mitigations were done to address those?
We basically had to, I'll say, redesign large aspects of the park. The county, the original design, we were bringing soil in, and we were going to raise the elevation of the park to the height of the curbs. It's curb to curb. And the county said you can't do that. And so we had to figure out a way to keep all the water on site. And so there was a lot of excavation that was done. The price went up considerably. Gravel was brought in. Lots of, it's called 57. It's a clean gravel. It works well for storing water and allowing for water to be in a place before it's able to naturally go into the ground. And soil conditions over there were a real challenge, as they are in many parts of the town. A lot of hard clay. And so those changes were made, and then we had to redesign how the footings were done, considering that we were building on fill, because there's footings with all the play equipment. So the cost went up considerably in the redesign when the county came back and said you have to maintain the elevation that was the street elevation. We were not allowed to change that.
I see. Thank you so much for explaining that. We haven't really had, I don't think we've had a real big rain event probably since this was constructed with the mitigations in it, huh? So you're not sure how, at this point, we're not totally sure how effective or what it will be like.
Well, I don't know the exact amount of water that it's supposed to be able to hold, but it's a lot.
Okay.
Because we did dig a lot of the road base was dug out, and then soil was dug out, and a lot of gravel was trucked in there.
I see.
It's tens of thousands of dollars of gravel that was brought in.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
To provide an area for the water to go.
So, you know, I definitely have, I mean, it's beautiful what y'all have done, and thanks for making that happen. But I did notice changes from some of the original, or not original, but earlier meetings about the design. And one of the major changes I've noticed is I don't see any vegetation. I don't see a shade tree or anything like that. You know, because plants also can absorb water. They're also a solution for that kind of thing. Not certainly. It sounds like the solution you have in place is definitely superior to just a tree for sure. But I was curious if there's any vegetation planned, certainly for shade as a minimum for the users of this park.
So trees were discussed as and other types of plants were as well. Much like we have had discussions with the county on Plummer Park, having the lazy meadow design, there's certain plants that can absorb a lot more water. And I'm not a plant person, so I'm not sure what plants, but there were plants that were recommended, saying, hey, you know, how about if we plant these? And in this case, the county and the engineers' calculations were, we have to build something.
Sure,
We-
sure.
We couldn't plant something and meet the requirements. And actually, there's a portion of the requirements that we were not even able to meet with the redesign. And they're giving us credit for some of our other stormwater management projects.
Wow. Well,
to
congratulations on that.
to offset what we have to do here.
Mhm,
So as much as we've done here, and like I said, bringing in, I don't know how many tons of gravel, that still wasn't even enough when they said we weren't allowed to raise the elevation. And we wanted to stay within the curbs. We weren't trying to go higher than the curbs. Because originally we thought you put a lot of soil in there, the soil is going to help as well. And they said, no, you have to stay, you have to stay at that same elevation.
I'm hopeful that all development in town is going, that they're going to be as strict with these requirements with the flexibility, obviously, that you also got from them with regards to offsetting with other projects you're doing,
Correct.
which is great. But I'm still wondering about the usability of the park and the opportunity for any kind of shade there.
Well, I think once the park's up and running, and I'm sure that we will work with the green team and getting some recommendations on what type of tree we can plant there. We may have to actually bring some soil in, because when you dig down, it's just a lot of gravel.
Or
So-
you can put things in pots above the ground too.
Yes.
Big, huge pots. But,
Yeah.
but it takes up space, obviously, that we want space there for people to play. And the only other thing I'll mention, just around that park, not town property, are some very mature trees, and I think it'd be worth. And thankfully, those trees are on the edge of the parcels they're on, not knowing what the future holds for that land, but to when those trees leaf out, see the impact that they have on this park, and their loss would be, how tragic that potentially would be, not just for the environment, but for the users of the park. So I just throw that little foreshadow out there too as well. But thank you so much for all that you've done, and for persevering through the requirements for the stormwater management, which I know is a priority for you, for everyone here. So appreciate you sticking with it, and you've got a really beautiful park there to show for it.
And thank you for your comments, Ms. Katz. The one thing that I'd point out is in the center picture on the upper level, that is an accessible swing. And so we have lots of accessible features in the park, and we're trying to live up to the town's values in these projects.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me about that, because I did notice that when I walked by, and I think that's something when you do communications about this park, just like the Wi-Fi communications, this is definitely something not just to be proud of, but to really try to communicate it to the right people who will benefit from it. So thank you so much for that too.
Mr. Mayor, can I move along?
Please do.
Keith, can you go to the next slide? So that's just some more pictures of the same project. It shows where we have the fence in, and yes, so we're making progress. The next slide be a different project. This is the 48th Avenue sidewalk. Both federally and town funded. CDBG is federal funds. We receive them through the county, but the county receives them from the federal government and follows government guidelines. So when I mentioned earlier about policy changes may impact future project budgets, this is an example of that. So we will have this project complete by the end of the month. And then Ivy's noted here will come close to completing the sidewalk network from 410 to Longfellow. And there's an add-on of a curb ramp reconstruction on a northeast corner of 48th and Longfellow. So we're making good progress on this project. So hopefully the weather cooperates, and in the next 15 days, we'll have this finished. Next slide. So the municipal center project, you've seen the outside. There's a reminder here of other things that we've done under this same banner, and that is the building generators, the new HVAC system, the new roof. And we are near completion, all right? And so with the current contractor, we're just about to wrap things up. I've alluded to this. I think I even said it clearly, but I want to use this time to reiterate. We are going to have some aspects of the job that we're going to farm that out to a subsequent contractor. At this point, we want to get things wrapped up, get the UNO, and then we'll have a subsequent contractor take care of some more minor things. That's the most cost-effective thing to do. Avoiding any additional cost overruns is foremost in our minds. So outstanding task, we still have the fire alarm system outstanding. Lots of work has gone into this. We came to you all in June and said, this is what we're being told. So both the contractor and the county have backed down substantially from where they were. They haven't agreed 100% with our position, but they're a lot closer to our position than where they had been. And right now we're waiting for the final cost estimate for the fire alarm upgrade. There's some things in the front office, the council chambers, in terms of the ceiling lights and some work on the ceiling tile and the grids, interior doors, punch list items. But we're making good progress. If you go to the next slide, it's not often I think someone would show a picture of a restroom, public restroom, and say, look at this. But if there was ever a picture of something that you would say, boy, this is outdated. When you walked into the restrooms in Town Hall, it told a story of the 1980s. It was pretty bad. And so there's modern tile, there's new stalls, there's new fixtures. It's looking like a modern office building. And so we're getting there. The upper center picture with the cabinetry, that's in the main conference room, right off the council chambers. Right below that, that's a former storage area on the second floor of the police department. We actually will have office space for the sergeants. They've never had their own space to go and to meet and to work. So the sergeants will have an office space. There's an expanded investigation area as well. So we're making good progress, and we're holding the contractor to account. It probably goes without saying, but I'm going to verbalize it anyway. The staff know the frustration that the council has on this project, and we share that frustration. If we could make this be complete more quickly, we would. We've learned a lot in this process, but we've had a lot of valves going back to that picture of the types of pipelines we navigate. We've had a lot of pressure valves triggered and people shutting off other valves, and we would have to reroute and go through different systems and processes. And it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. But the end is in sight. And so we will keep you all apprised of any additional changes that we have. Mr. Robinson. Adam and Emily Plummer Park. This is in 2 phases. So we do believe that we'll have the original Lazy Meadow concept completed by June of 25. And so the council's aware that the Loeb Fellows are working on some design elements. Ivy has met with them and have talked through what it is they're going to be proposing. If you shrink that down a little bit, you'll see the last bullet under phase 2 is that we have to figure out the funding for the improvements they're going to recommend. We anticipate coming to you in January with the recommendations from the Loeb Fellows in terms of adding design elements. And so when we look at project pipelines, that's another phase to an existing project that we're going to have to figure out how to fund in fiscal 26. Next slide, Mr. Robinson. Beal Circle. So we had received a grant from the state. Senator Washington had worked that out for us. So design work for stormwater management improvements there is underway. The actual improvements are going to cost in the range of $500,000, maybe a little bit more. And so the mayor and council, as one of their priorities with the state, was to seek a state bond bill. So we're working with Senator Washington's office to complete that official paperwork. The ask was made at the legislative dinner. And then as a backup plan, we're exploring whether or not we can get some funding from the county's municipal participation plan. In any event, when these improvements are made, we will be working with the county for some of the improvements, not all, like the rain guarding can stay under town control, but other types of features, we would ask that the county take over maintenance of them. Next slide, Mr. Robinson.
Mr. Town Manager?
Yes.
The bullet about floodplain inquiry submitted to DPI per recent elevation changes. Can you spend 20 seconds expanding on that?
And I will, if we can get to the next project,
Okay.
because the exact same thing is true there.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes. So Mr. Robinson, if you can go to the next project. So the Queensbury demolition and parking lot. So you all know that the houses have been removed, and we've been working with DPI, our engineers have, and DPI apparently has a thing they call a technogram. And it's spoken about as if it's a term that a layperson should know exists. But it's just an internal thing. It's basically an administrative order. And so what we ran into here, and what also will impact the design at Beal Circle, is this technogram. And so this administrative order from DPI says that we have to now design things for a floodplain where the elevation, and don't quote me on the numbers here, it used to be like 32.3 feet. We now have to design things at 34 feet, let's say. And so as it relates to this parking lot, we had completed the vast majority of the design work. And while there's no official promulgation of this technogram, reportedly there's a link on the county website someplace, I haven't found it yet, to the technogram. And it says, well, instead of designing things to the maps that are available on PG Atlas and elevations that are published, you have to follow this new technogram, this new administrative order. And So where we've landed with the county on that, because we pushed back pretty hard, is they now want us to conduct a study. So we're preparing a study to show that the impact of this parking lot is going to be negligible as it relates to stormwater runoff. And the same type of elevation thing is true at Beale Circle, where we have to comply with the requirements in this technogram that I would say was not promulgated. It's a change in a technical requirement that we didn't know about and our engineers didn't know about. And we have filed for a waiver, and our waiver was declined. And so we are getting a price from the engineer at this point to see what the cost will be for the study. And yes, so pressure valves build up, people turn, other valves closed, and we are in a position where we try to roll with it a little bit and try to figure this out. Certainly, I think it would have helped us if we would have known. And I don't know the exact dates, but there were conversations that we had with the county, our engineering team had with the county on the parking lot, for example, and nothing was mentioned about this technogram. And then we missed submitting our final calculations where we would have been grandfathered by, I believe, 2.5 months. We're 2.5 months late to a deadline we didn't know about. And because of that, now we are going to go through a study period where we have to demonstrate that putting in a parking lot here is not going to create a significant hardship for the watershed or adjoining properties.
Councilmember Smith, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's profoundly frustrating, disappointing, and I assume that staff shares that perspective. This is a repeated problem with DPI, and not just for public works projects. I know our local businesses have experienced a similar thing where they have been continually in contact with DPI, gone above and beyond in good faith to comply with all regulations, been even issued permits just for DPI to show up for an inspection and say, actually, no, the permit that we gave you, that we said was approved, is actually not approved, and we're invalidating on the spot. And our businesses are similar to the town, losing incredible amounts of money, right? Because every day that they're closed for these delays, it's a big enough problem for us, but they're not generating revenue on those days. So that's really upsetting. And Mr. Town Manager, I certainly appreciate your diligence and compliance with all applicable rules and regulations, and I wouldn't ask you to violate those. But I am curious, if a similar municipality to ours were encountering similar issues and just decided to continue with the plans as planned without doing a study period or whatever it is the county has retroactively decided as a requirement for the thing they already approved. Do we have any sort of thoughts or intelligence on what the repercussions for that municipality might be?
Well, we are compelled to follow the state stormwater management plan and the county stormwater management plan. I will be frank that I am unaware of the authority by which technograms are issued. I've asked that question pointedly, and I've yet to receive a response. So I think it's part of a larger discussion about how DPI functions, how things are promulgated. But I've been in the meetings where I've asked, where can I find the new map? You're telling me there's a new map. Where is it? And nobody knows, or they were unable to share. That's unfortunate, because it goes to your point, sir. I don't know how a small business that doesn't have professional staff and engineers and deeper pockets than, we don't have deep pockets, but our pockets are deeper than a small, especially mom and pop size business. So we do our best to comply. I think are respectful in our interactions, but my opinion is there's system and process problems. And again, in this particular case, nothing was mentioned to us. And there were conversations, and so they knew, the staff person knew the town's working on this. They also knew that a technogram had been issued and what the date was for the grandfathering. And there are no communications where they said, hey, there's this, until we finished our design, went and they said, you missed it by 2.5 months. You would have had to have this to us in February. You gave it to us in April. Sorry. You now have to comply with this new administrative order. And so then we asked for a waiver and we were denied. All this within the last 2 weeks. And so we're going to look at what we can do, but your point's well taken, sir. This is frustrating. And it's something that perhaps the next year or so, they'll make good progress in the county on figuring some of this stuff out.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Have staff engaged with the county council at all on this?
I did include Councilmember Olson on an email thread when I first learned of this. Yes.
Great. If possible and if appropriate, Mr. Town Manager, I don't know if it's forwarding that traffic. I don't want to get in your business. I would like something that I could share with Councilmember Olson from the elected official side, and also circulate amongst various people who have indicated an interest in the office of county executive, which there will be a special election for. Because this is, I mean, this is super frustrating for you guys, for the staff, and for us at town, but we have businesses experiencing the same problems that are on the verge of like going out of business. And we, particularly the staff, even more so than us on the council, have worked so hard to build great things for our town, whether it's a thriving business and restaurant scene that's threatened by this, or just like the basic things of building parking lots in our town. And this is just unacceptable from the county. And we need to, as a council, I think, leverage whatever influence we have in our roles to I mean, you're right, it's a huge process problem that takes more than just making calls, because it'll be another problem next week. But whatever we can do to, at least on these individual projects, to get them moving, we've got to do something.
Yes, and Mr. Mayor, I believe I copied you on that communication with the council member as a matter of routine, just so the whole council knows. I don't reach out to a county elected official unless I copy the town's chief elected official.
Outstanding.
And I expect to see some of those people you mentioned Thursday night at the PGCMA legislative event. So I will be discussing this with them at that time.
Outstanding. And anything we could find out also about what, if any, repercussions there would be for any municipality to disregard a technogram, which sounds like
I can
70s disco party or something. But
I could speculate. I mean, if we did this construction without having a building permit in hand, and we will not have one, and if we don't comply or we don't get a waiver approved on a second attempt, perhaps, then more than likely there would be a stop work order from the county. They would put up chain link fence around the spot, and we would be stuck in court for a long time.
Yeah, I don't want to bog us down in a conversation.
Well, and our contractors, even if they stop short of that, the contractors aren't going to want to violate a stop work order because that threatens their livelihood.
Good point.
And
Well,
so,
thank you
so
for all
it's
the
not,
details.
it's not necessarily action against us. It'd be action against the people we employ. That will stop us unless we did the work in-house, and we don't have the expertise to do this.
Well understood on that point, and thank you all for indulging my frustrated rants there. I really appreciate staff for staying engaged on this and dealing with the frustration on a day-to-day basis. This is just, it's unacceptable, and we got to figure something out. Or the county has to figure something out. So thank you for those details, Mr. Town Manager.
Ms. Katz?
I just want to mention that it seems to me, just listening in, there's two issues here. You know, one is the significant issue about the challenges of businesses and the town and getting projects completed, working with the county. But just please don't lose sight of the other issue for me is the stormwater management issue. And let's not, I already see on this slide, it says porous asphalt and paved drain pavers, which is wonderful to see because we have towns just down Route 1 that used the paved drain pavers. And I think that was always part of this plan. So I appreciate that. But let's just not lose sight of having to comply with the state and county stormwater management plans, because I think there's a lot of value for our town in doing that. Thanks.
Ms. Merrick, could I respond?
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Katz. I certainly agree with that. And I think making progress on this project would be better for storm management. And that's part of my frustration is that in the meantime, we're not doing anything about it. You know, our town with wonderful assistance from the Green Team always considers these things. I think that if these standards weren't in place, we would still be doing this, right? Because we have folks in our homes in our town whose homes are getting flooded when there's a flash flood. So for that reason, we have to do it. I think we will always go above and beyond on those sort of things. And you're right, they are very important. But the county process is just inhibiting actual progress on the things that would accomplish what they say those processes, as broken as they are intended for. So appreciate your comments and certainly agree on the need to ensure we are upholding proper stormwater management standards.
Certainly. And I would just also throw in too, I just attended a brown bag on a tree conservation law that just went into effect, actually, I think in 2023. But just to consider that I don't mean to defend the county. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but the consideration that they're being driven by other forces that are having them, communication certainly does not seem to be good at all on this process. But I don't know if it's just being, if the start of it is with the county. So keep in mind that, well, as you well know, it's a complicated pipeline.
I could have
Roberts,
a
go ahead,
long
Mr. I'm
I could
sorry.
have a long discussion about where the county is with their stormwater management compliance, but I think we need to focus back onto the topic of the presentation and the CIP project pipeline. So go ahead, Mr. Town Manager.
Ms. Robinson, can you go to the next slide? So the reason I actually had a line worked out for this, I was going to talk about how we were thrown a curveball, and that's why the pictures are curved there. But we've just discussed that. Next slide, Mr. Rhodes. And that just takes us to questions. So this is on the current pipeline, highlighting some projects. The takeaways really are that we have projects at all phases. So we have our 4 phases of moving projects forward. And despite uncertainty, we have to add to the pipeline. As things fall off and things get complete, there's other community needs, and we need to funnel them into the pipeline. I think the town has done a good job in delivering the more perhaps mundane projects, the 17 street and sidewalk projects that were completed last year, and we're going to have 15 or so more. There's a lot being done, but we have to keep feeding the pipeline. And so as things move from design, basically concept to design, and then to bidding and to construction, we have to put more back into the hopper and have things flow through. So with that, I'll take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Council members, questions or comments?
Sorry for stepping on your joke, Mr. Town Manager.
Any questions at all from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Inyang, go ahead.
And I appreciate the presentation. It was super helpful to see the deep dive on some of these project pictures as well. Anxiously looking forward to getting to the town center, town hall. My question was around the sort of the technology upgrades. Was before this, but I know we've had funds that were talked about technology upgrade that were, I believe, starting CIP and then moved into, I guess, just the regular operating budget. Are there any projects in the current list now that would fall a similar pattern of one-time expense, but they may have like ongoing expenses, or all of these pretty much one and done?
No. So a prime example of that is the camera system, because it's more than just a camera system. So you have a head-end, so we can broadcast on the cable channel, and the new sound system and the microphones and all that. So we're not prepared tonight to say how much, but let's say that the camera system is $200,000 or thereabout. That's the one-time cost. But then on the operating side, you're going to be talking about licensing fees, maintenance fees, translating fees for translating all the meetings. And when you add all those things together, you're $25,000 or $30,000 a year in ongoing cost. And so yes, it's not just one time, but you're going to have those types of costs. And then if you take it back into more simpler and take it even out of technology, as we build these parks, we have to build in having for the first time ever, we have a playground. And so we have to have all the right types of bolts and nuts and spare parts, and all that is additional operating cost. When maintaining the landscaping at Adam and Emily Plummer Park, that's going to be an added cost. So technology, yes. Ongoing licensing fees, ongoing maintenance fees. The translation cost is considerable. And I know Paul is very close to figuring out what finance software that we want to go with. And that's going to be a subscription, but those types of subscription charges, they add up and impact our operating budget. I hope that answers in part your question, sir.
It does. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that we're planning not just for the one-time expense, but the ongoing maintenance or licensing fees. So thanks for clearing that up.
Any additional council questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? Ms. Katz, go ahead.
Are there any CIP projects in the 2025 budget that you don't project that have not been completed that you don't project would be in the 2026 proposed budget?
Not at this time. The only thing that has a question mark on is the Linear Park, Taylor to 47 Linear Park because we got to figure out the feasibility of getting over this this one section of the land. But we're not projecting that anything would be removed from the current pipeline.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional public questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Kellon, Councilmember Kellon, go ahead.
Yeah, I listened to the town manager's presentation, and I didn't hear about the Riverdale Bridge near the elementary school. What is going to happen with that project? I didn't hear nothing about it.
Mr. Mayor, you want me to handle that, or?
I'll go ahead and, well, I'll start, and if you want to add some details, that's fine. Councilmember Kellon, that's a state project. So the state manages state roads, which include things like East-West Highway and Kenilworth, and actually River Road now and Baltimore Avenue. And they also cover bridges over rivers, such as that one. Minor bridges like we have over creeks, then those are ours. But over a river, then it's handled by the state. And so that bridge project is a state project.
Okay, well, now I understand. Thank you.
Sure.
And Mr. Mayor,
Mhm.
if I could add one clarifying comment,
Sure.
as it relates to Wells Run, it's my understanding that the county actually has control the bridges that cross Wells Run. So our town streets that cross over Wells Run, that's a county responsibility.
That's very interesting. I wonder if they know that.
I've had conversation with some county staff over the years, and they would like it to not be so, but they actually own the vast majority of that land. It was transferred to them from WSSC a long time ago.
Well, it makes sense since they own the stormwater infrastructure underneath the bridge that they would own the bridge as well. But I actually didn't know that until just now. So thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Yes, well, that's my understanding, and I've had discussions over the years. Now, we'll see when we want them to replace the bridge.
Okay. Okay, any additional council or public questions or comments about this presentation? Okay, then let's move along on the agenda. I'm going to point out to everyone that we have nominally 11 items under the work session discussion. We have one specific item under unfinished business that we have a request for, and it is 9:05 p.m. So I'm going to give a very short mayor's report. A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, there was an incident where a pedestrian was struck near College Park Academy in the early evening. It was already dark. I spoke at the Discovery District meeting a week or two after that, and it was brought to my attention by the director of College Park Academy who was at that meeting that it occurred. I thought that it was later at night. It was in fact in sort of early evening, 5 or 6 o'clock. And that was a time when students were still having activities, and some of them were leaving at about that time. And she mentioned that the street was dark. And so I was looking at possible upgrades, but I was driving through there this evening and noticed that at least something contributing to the darkness is that the street lights that are there, which seem to be like a string of Christmas lights, and that if one of them goes out, they all go out. There seem to be 6 or 8 lights that are out along there. So if staff could reach out and try to get those lights back on, I think we could quickly address some of the issues in that area, some of the safety issues in that area. And the only other thing I'm going to discuss this evening is that Friday evening into Saturday morning about 4 a.m. is the winter solstice. So that means that Friday night will be the longest night of the year. And I believe that Saturday will be the shortest day of the year. And that also means that it's the holiday season. And many people are observing many different holidays. And I want to wish everyone a happy and peaceful and joyous holidays. And for anyone who has a difficult time during the holidays, and I know that that my own family will be experiencing some of this. Also, I wish you peace and joy, even on top of the difficulties. And with that, I will close my report. And let's move on the agenda. Town manager's report.
Yes, I'll try to keep it short, but I have 9 or 10 issues to mention. All right, so so the mayor and council are aware, staff will meet yet this week with the leadership of the Riverdale Volunteer Fire Department, Inc., to discuss a potential presentation of what their plan is to right the ship, if you will, of the various operational issues that they've experienced. A reminder, Town Hall and DPW operations will be closed for the Christmas holiday, and the same for New Year's. And I've experienced some arm twisting lately. So we're actually going to close those operations and start both holidays a half day early. So it'll be a half day on Christmas Eve and a half day on New Year's Eve. Wasn't much arm twisting, but just a little. And then we still have the toy drive. We're accepting toys through Wednesday. You can drop them off at the police department. We had an event where children from the elementary school went shopping with some of our police officers for the holiday last week. It was well attended. It's a good event, and lots of smiles by the children. And it really helps our officers as well connect with the community, connect with families. That's important. The town center trail and parking lot redesign, Natoli Place. So Lafayette redesign will be on the mayor and council's agenda on January 6th. And then separately, we're working on an in-person meeting right now. We'd like to say it's going to be in Town Hall. That's what we're working towards on January 13th. So on the council agenda to receive council input and thoughts, and then there's a more general public meeting on the 13th. We're seeking volunteers for a youth member of the Board of Elections, as well as volunteers for election judges and the Board of Election Appeals. And then staff are working on the 2nd annual Valentine's Day event at Crescent Cities. So more on that. And then the last thing I have, just so, and as we implement this, I'll send more information out to the council. But we've been in touch with some vendors reached out to us on the automated stop sign enforcement that the town supported, and that is being worked out through the county now. So these vendors at no cost to the town will analyze various intersections that we ask them to and report back to us. There wouldn't be any enforcement taken. They will report back to us on the number of violations. And that certainly will help in our planning and in our justification to the county, because the county has to approve whether or not there is an automated stop sign enforcement effort at a particular intersection. So that has to find its way through the county council. Right now, the county has a one-page survey which asks for the number of citations issued in a defined period of time. And while we're going to fill that out, we'd like to include information that says that we actually had this equipment set up. And in addition to the 4 or 5 violations that we've observed and issued citations for, here's the extra 100 or 200 that were observed during this defined period of time. So before that equipment is put out in the community, we'll share with the community, and I'll share specifically with the mayor and council where those efforts are going to be undertaken. But the chief is working out logistics, and once we have some more clarity, we'll share that with the council and the community. And then that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. That brings us to council committee and ward reports, and I will go through the council in ward order. Councilmember Smith, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No comments this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Foe, Ward 2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll defer until the legislative.
Till the new year. Okay. Councilmember Lengua, Ward 3.
Ward 3, 3 for 3.
Councilmember Enyang, Ward 4.
My only question is around the stop sign locations. Is that going to be based off of known citations or staff suggestions, or are these vendors going to suggest stuff based on? I'm assuming we'd have to tell them where to start.
Yes, so, and Chief, jump in here if I got this wrong, but the police are gonna say, here's the intersections we want you to look at. That may be based on our own observations. It may be based on number of citations. It may be based on accidents. It may be based on complaints from our residents, all the above. Do I have that right, Chief?
100%. Yes.
Thank you. I will know where to forward my my suggestions. I'll send those along too. In terms of other,
and please do, yes.
Yeah. In terms of other reports, now I'll defer to the new year. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember. And last, Councilmember Kellon, Ward 6.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, this is my observation in my own jurisdiction, and even not in my jurisdiction, but I found out that a lot of drivers, when the place is dark, they don't put their headlights on. Even when it's raining, many drivers don't put their headlights on. So if you are if you want to exit somewhere, a driver is coming and the place, that area is dark, it's coming without lights. That's why a lot of accidents is happening. So I don't know whether the chief going to coordinate this to the other police officers to start checking these drivers who are driving in the night or dark place or on the rain when their headlights is not on. So that is very important. Apart from that, I did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think you know, as I do, that operating your windshield wipers without your headlights on is illegal. I can ask the police to perhaps tell us in a month or two how they deal with this. But thank you for your report. That brings us on the agenda to public comments. Are there any public comments? I'm not seeing any microphones open up or hands go on, so let's move on to work session discussion items. Item number 1, recommendation from the Walk, Bike, Drive Advisory Committee regarding Riverdale Road Bridge project.
Director Barnes, could you cover this one for Ms. Lewis?
I'd be happy to. The Walk, Bike, Drive Advisory Committee discussed the Riverdale Road Bridge project at a meeting earlier this year. This was at a request of a resident in town. So through their discussion, they expressed their support for its bike and pedestrian infrastructure located on the north side of the bridge. That's at least 10 feet wide, as well as the raised crosswalk located right where the Northeast Branch Trail crosses Riverdale Road. The Walk, Bike, Drive Advisory Committee voted unanimously to recommend that the mayor and council send a letter to MDOT SHA supporting both the 10-foot wide pedestrian slash bike infrastructure on the north side of the bridge, as well as the raised crosswalk. So this will be the first official recommendation from the Walk Bike Drive Advisory Committee, just requesting mayor and council action to send a letter supporting those two features of the Riverdale Road Bridge project.
Thank you, Director Barnes. And as I understand the request, and this is, I haven't had a chance to talk to the Walk Bike Drive committee members about this, but as I understand it, the idea is to take the northern part of the Northeast Branch Trail and sort of wrap it across the bridge and connect up with the nascent trail. It's not much of a trail that heads north of Riverdale Road from there, and underneath the East-West Highway Bridge on the east side of the river. And this seems sensible. It, of course, has to be engineered, and it may shift exactly where the bridge is in order to make it work. But it seems like a reasonable request to me. And I agree that having a mixed infrastructure there to handle both bicycle and pedestrian traffic would, and a 10-foot wide, would particularly make it easier for students to walk across the bridge to get to school. Any council comments or discussion on this item?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Foe, go ahead.
that's awesome. It is. I mean, to see the advisory committee making its first recommendation, it's something we've worked for. It seems like it's very feasible. I think this is fantastic.
Okay, so any other council discussion of this? Any public comments? Well, if there's no objections, then I will ask the staff to write a letter of support and have it on the agenda for January 6th. That brings us to the next work session discussion item, fiscal year 2025 revenue update.
Mr. Jones.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor and Council, members of the public. Tonight's revenue comparison covers the months of July up to December 13th, 2024. And it covers the three fiscal years that preceded. So we have 24, 22.
Can we, I'm sorry,
24.
Mr. Jones, can we adjust the screen so we see the report? It should just be the next pages, I believe. Ms. Barnes?
Yep. Page 2. Mr. Robinson, if we could go on the same document, if you scroll down to the next page. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, so the first major category is local taxes, which includes real estate, personal property, local, and operating taxes. The total for fiscal year 2025 is $6,181,405. At this point, this makes up 80% of what was budgeted. So at this point, revenue is pretty strong in this category. We don't really have much control over this. We receive this revenue when it comes in. In comparison, if we look at line 4001, which is real estate taxes, for fiscal year 2024, that figure was at $4,149,000. So for the current fiscal year, we're at 84%. In the previous year, we were just at 70% of what was budgeted at this point. But again, just want to reiterate that this is more of a timing thing. In some years, we receive revenue earlier than others. The next major category that we have is licenses and permits. The total for fiscal year 2025 is $196,000. 41. The major part of this category is the multifamily rental licenses, currently at 145,180. So we're already at 99% of what was budgeted. So the multifamily rental licenses at this point have been collected. And for the licenses and permits as a whole, we're at 89% of what was budgeted for the current fiscal year. So for fiscal year 2025, we are already pretty much where we need to be, with roughly half the year left remaining for revenue. The next category is administrative fees. This includes abatement charges and municipal infractions. At this point, we are at 2,500 as a total. Next category is fines and forfeitures. We have a total of $34,090. If you zero in at 4310 parking citations, that number is significantly higher. That's due in part to the new parking enforcement program that we've implemented for fiscal year 2025. So that's why we are significantly higher there. And the last category is community safety programs, which includes Safe Speed for Students. Speed camera revenue at this point is totals 455,693. And speed camera revenue is higher due to the additional cameras that we have running, as well as some cameras running 24 hours. And this is even with, again, I'd like to always remind that we are 2 months behind for the speed camera revenue. So at this point, we just have October collected, but that total is higher than last year due to the additional cameras. So at this point, as far as total revenue is concerned, we have a total of $6,869,728, which is up in comparison to the 3 previous fiscal years. Again, that's mostly due to the Safe Speed for Students. We have an increase there, as well as multifamily rental licenses and real estate taxes being higher than previous years. So yeah, that concludes the revenue report. And if there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Council members, any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
my question is for the speed camera revenue being 2 months behind. Was it still a higher percentage than we expected, or is it in line? Can just say for that.
Yeah, it's still in line with what we expected. With us,
Okay.
we had planned on implementing the new cameras, so we had increased our anticipated revenues. So the budget for speed camera revenue and expenditures is higher for fiscal 25 as opposed to 24.
Okay, and then I'm assuming we're getting the revenue was higher with the 24/7 enforcement for most of the cameras, and you're saying even that budgeted in, it's still sort of on track for what we expected. We're not seeing like extraordinary high amount of tickets.
Correct. What we have is what we expected and what we had budgeted. So
Okay.
the revenue, yeah, that we budgeted, we do anticipate reaching that number.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the council? Any public comments or questions? I'm going to speculate that the construction at East West and Kenilworth being more passable this year is probably also increasing revenues by a little bit. That people can drive faster through town. And so if we really want to slow people down, then we can always just put Jersey barriers in the middle of that intersection, and that would help us out. But I don't think SHA would approve that. Okay, thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Appreciate the report as always. And let's move on to work session discussion item 3, Deputy Town Manager Charter Amendment to Article 7 and code changes to Chapter 2.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So I brought this up to the council a number of months ago. And we had, I believe, a closed meeting discussion about restructuring some things related to this. And from my perspective, this is about properly positioning the organization for long-term sustainability. As the memo indicates, of our department heads, so the town has 5 department heads and then a town manager. And among the department heads, several will likely be leaving the town's employ between 3 and 4 years from now. If the council chooses to keep me employed, I anticipate that I would be leaving between 3 and 4 years from now. And so as I've mentioned previously, planning to ensure that we have leaders in place is really important. I think the town has done some incredible things over the last number of years. And in order to keep that momentum going, we have to have institutional knowledge. We have to have leaders who have been trained to assume duties when we have positions vacant. It's hard to recruit in a small municipality. And part of that answer, from my perspective, is to create a deputy town manager position from among the current department heads. It would not be a position adding a new position and keeping the same number of department heads, but choosing from among the existing department heads an appointment of a deputy town manager that would, over the next 3 years or so, have the opportunity to work outside of their current assignment, outside of their current department, and give them experience in all the other departments. So we would be investing in a deputy town manager. It would also, another benefit of this is to have continuity of operations should something happen to your town manager. It was just back in September, I became very ill, and there's certain things only the town manager can do. And so what you have in front of you tonight are draft amendments to both code and charter. I believe I can describe our interaction, Mr. Mayor, as we worked very closely together on drafting this language. And perhaps some additional tweaks are needed once the council has an opportunity to digest this. But I think it's all about balance and protecting the organization. That's language my staff hear from me often. Everything we do, it can't be about personality and the individuals in positions. It's about writing things so it is efficient and effective for the organization, and has the proper checks and balances, not just for the executive branch, but for the legislative branch of town government. And I think what we've arrived at with these proposed edits gets us there. And with that, I would actually ask the mayor if he has some comments before he opens this up to council discussions.
I'd be happy to just say that that the overall goals of this to set up the organization, set up the town, to have stability, to have succession planning, as we say in my day job, as for those of us who are getting closer to retirement age, and we start worrying about who's going to take over afterwards and have a smooth transfer of power, about the continuity that the town manager mentioned in case of an emergency. I was out of town when the council had to meet to have an emergency meeting to appoint an acting town administrator, town manager, excuse me. And my concern with the initial draft was just that there were some possible unintended consequences of this legislation. And so, as the town manager said, he and I have been working very closely to get to the draft you see before you, to ensure that that there are no pitfalls to adding in this position. And I have to admit that reading this over the weekend and before the meeting, then there are a couple of wording tweaks that I came up with also. So it is still quite very much a draft and can still take some input. So I'm happy to discuss this with all of you, but except for those very modest wording tweaks, just to clarify a few things, then I think that the ideas and the overall structure of this is very much an important thing and in line with what the town needs to do moving forward. So with that, council members, do you have any questions or comments about the proposed legislation and the overall idea?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Inyang, go ahead.
No, I think it's I appreciate the thought going into this. I think it's important for all the reasons stated for having this position, and I think the work to go through to see that there is no. I always use the example of someone, you know, wins the lottery tomorrow and they quit. You know, what positions are we in? That's a unique perspective where we have unintended consequences or blind spots, and so I think a position like this helps. I know one concern that I had was around the fact that it's an existing member. I guess it's envisioned that an existing member of the executive leadership team would go into this position. One was just like compensation for, you know, the person taking on the additional responsibilities with one, and then I think two was I was trying to read through it to see if it's still there. Is that still a requirement that the person would have to be one of the other department heads, or
Yes.
That is one?
That's still in there. Yes.
You know, one of the things I think I still feel like we should think through. Does it make the possibility of a person not being a department head filling those roles? And I'm actually thinking specifically in the short term, right? If a department head sort of retires or is looking to retire and transition, that might be an opportunity to have them sort of, you know, fill a role like that for a period of time, and not have to and not be tied to you must run your department and then only then would you be eligible. And so it's I've seen this done in other ways where you know, senior folks who are leaving, and as a way to kind of keep them in place for a little bit, are put in some special detail or something where there are still clear responsibilities, but it's not sort of restricted to the sort of ongoing or full-time department heads. It's something to think about and consider. We can have a conversation now or take it offline.
Yeah, I think well, I'll just mention that in my own organization right now, for my day job, I'll be clear there. Then there are a lot of staff changes happening. So the person at the top will be leaving in January, and people have been asked to take on these short-term positions, and in order to backfill that job, and there's a cascade involved. And I anticipate the same sort of thing happening in town government, that if someone becomes the deputy town manager, that it might be that their deputy will take on some more duties within the department. But I believe that the idea behind not just having this position as a new slot and open slot is to keep the financial impact of this change relatively low, because otherwise we would be picking up another position at a few $100,000 a year if we're paying somebody directly. And so the idea, as I understood it from town manager and understand it from what's written into the legislation, is that this is a training opportunity for someone who is anticipating preparing themselves for having the job of the town manager. And so as such, very often when you're doing intense training, then you have to put in some extra hours in order to make it work. But we can certainly discuss some possibilities of perhaps reducing that or temporarily increasing the compensation of a department head during such time. We could discuss that.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can comment on that. So from my perspective, creating an additional position in addition to the department heads is unnecessary, as well as cost prohibitive. But I fully anticipate that there would be a salary adjustment for someone who is appointed as a deputy town manager. There would be an adjustment, a justifiable one, to their salary. But I don't think in our organization, the size we are now, that we can justify having a town manager, a deputy town manager, and 5 department heads. I think we can justify having a town manager, a deputy town manager, and 4 department heads. I think that's justifiable. If I had thought that I could justify having a standalone position, I would have put that together for you all. But I don't believe that can be justified. And that's not what I'm requesting either.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember?
Well, I'm happy to hear about the salary adjustment per person in the role. I think I would think that's a non-starter. Otherwise, you sign up for the additional work with no compensation. Obviously, there's the training aspect of it, so got perfectly in line there. I understand the idea of not having like a full-time role, and I'm a fan of flexibility, where in the case, I think the example I brought up essentially was like, we'll get the update on 6601, but something like that, which might take 5 to 10 years, maybe hoping that long, but maybe definitely 5 years to like go through. And in the event that the town manager mentioned that he's got 3 or 4 more years in, but the opportunity you can roll off and maybe become a deputy town manager in charge of the special project of 6601 to help us get us through the finish line for something that is already in flight, as an option. I don't know if it can be written in a way where it's not required to be, but there's the flexibility for things like that. We've got just so much talent and experienced folks who are in role and who potentially are leaving soon, and they're just the opportunity of keeping someone in a reduced capacity. This wouldn't be full time; this would be some lowered rate. Seems appealing to me, but I understand if the budget realities are not there, or if that's a concern that I have that's not necessary, then I'll drop the case.
Thank you. Councilmember Lingua? You're on mute, Councilmember, if you're speaking.
Yes, I know. Screen's a little slow. Anyway, we touched on a couple of these points. Previously, when we've had acting town managers, and it was someone on staff filling in for that position, there was an increase in their pay. So it's really not out of precedent of the council to have the measures that are being proposed here for an additional compensation for someone who would be deputy town manager. To the point about having it as a standalone position, that was tried as well, and to put it politely, it was awkward. Not going to really get into a lot of the detail about it, but it was something that within, I think, 2 fiscal years, the position was no longer funded, and thus the position was removed.
I remember that well. I wasn't
Yeah.
on the council, but I do remember that occurring.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Additional council questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, just weighing in to say, I think this is great. It's smart. It makes sense for our town. I think this position will require a person of incredible dedication, competence, and kindness. I hope we can locate such a person on this staff to fill the role. I'm sure you'll be able to do so, Mr. Town Manager. So fully support this.
Thank you, sir.
Any additional council comments? Any public comments on this this discussion item? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I can make an ask of the council.
Certainly.
If after you have an opportunity to digest the language, if you have questions or concerns or would like to meet to discuss, I'm available. And because we would like to keep things moving. One of the budget assumptions is that we would allow money for a salary increase in the fiscal 26 budget. And so I would like some understanding of whether or not this is going to move forward by February, because I'll have to bake some numbers in at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. And as I said, you and I we can discuss the minor tweaks in language that I thought of over the weekend. So discuss that this week. Okay, moving on our work session discussion items. Next item is review of Town Code Chapter 53, Section 9 to 13, regarding limited cooperation with immigration authorities.
And we have Chief Turner here this evening to go through what the code says. This was code amendments made just a few years ago to provide some clarity. Chief?
Good evening. As Mr. Town Manager just mentioned, no action is required at this evening's work session. Staff seek an opportunity to share with the mayor and council sections of Chapter 53 that related to limited cooperation with immigration authorities. On June 2nd, 2020, the mayor and council adopted an ordinance 2020-OR-05, which repealed Chapter 53 and replaced it with new language. Chapter 53, sections 9 through 13, as noted below. At the direction of the town manager, Deputy Chief Garcia and I have reviewed the ordinance since its inception in 2020. We don't offer any recommendations of changes. The ordinance as itself, it works well for the police department. we have no limitations on what we do. As you know, local law enforcement has no authority when it comes to immigration enforcement. The only relationship we have with immigration authorities is when it cross references into a criminal investigation. And that's something that we rarely see. Maybe once or twice a year, if that. The limitations on cooperation with immigration authorities, Section 53-9. Section 5310 was requesting information prohibited, as well as 5311, specific prohibited actions. And 5312, specific permitted actions. And lastly, 5313, compliance with federal law. If there are any questions about a particular section that I could answer, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Smith, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad we have this guidance in place and statute. I am curious on the note about criminal immigration warrants. I'm wondering how, I don't know how our officers or any officer interacts with these various databases, but when, say there's a stop, you call in, the identifying information. How do we get, what comes back in terms of a criminal warrant versus a detainer or an administrative warrant from ICE? How does that work exactly?
So the officer in general would run it through our dispatcher through NCIC, and if someone was wanted, they would get a return.
So
for immigration,
sorry, go ahead.
So for immigration, if there was a detainer, obviously we wouldn't arrest. It's not a criminal warrant. If we have local charges on an individual and they are taken to the Department of Corrections, it's my understanding their policy is that they have the same limitations that we do. So they would not notify immigration enforcement of an arrestee at the jail. Us as a town police department, we never pass off a wanted person to the jurisdiction they're wanted in. We process all our people through the Department of Corrections. So if it was a local warrant, like say from Virginia, there would have to be extradition. But for immigration, as we're speaking tonight, for a criminal warrant in NCIC, I've never seen it during my career.
Understood. I guess where I'm confused and looking for clarification, because you know far more about this than me, is as I understand it, there are, and what is outlined particularly here is that we, appropriately, I think, would execute a criminal warrant. But as I understand, and maybe I'm not correct here, but ICE can also issue administrative warrants that don't come from an immigration judge or a magistrate. And I'm wondering if those, what I worry about happening, and I'm looking for assurance that this can't happen through whatever mechanism, is that the administrative warrant comes up in NCIC. I don't know if that happens, but if it does, that's the scenario I'm thinking about here. You guys look to verify with ICE that there is a warrant, and they say, yes, there is a warrant because they have an administrative warrant, not a criminal warrant. And that there ends up being confusion where our officers looking to comply with this policy believe they have, but ICE hasn't necessarily been entirely forthcoming about what type of warrant it is, whether it's administrative or criminal. And maybe that's not something we can answer here tonight, but that's just something that I'm concerned about with the incoming administration and their past behavior of being less than forthcoming on such matters.
Sure, I believe I can answer it. So if it wasn't a criminal warrant, we wouldn't notify them. We wouldn't seek any type of information from them. Like I said before, unless there was local charges, like we would already, if we had already arrested someone and they went down to the Department of Corrections, then the Department of Corrections obviously runs everyone that comes in to the jail for warrants as well. We would never contact ICE and deliver a prisoner to them from our police department. And we don't contact them.
There do differentiate between criminal warrants and administrative warrants?
Correct.
Okay. Outstanding. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you so much, Chief.
No problem.
Any additional council questions for Chief Turner? Any public questions or comments for Chief Turner on this review of the town code? Okay, thank you, Chief. I appreciate the review. I appreciate reading the code changes from a couple of years ago, and I think it aligns with the town's values that that this is what we do, and appreciate that your staff is diligent about implementing this policy. Very much appreciated.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chief.
Next item on the agenda, item 5, Employee Legal Assistance Program.
And Mr. Smith had to exit the meeting, so I'm going to pinch hit for Paul. And so from time to time, we may have an employee who can be here on a variety of statuses. It's potential to have an employee here on temporary protective status, legally allowed to work, but here under a status that may be more policy and easily changed in a new administration. And I want to steer away from whether or not that condition currently exists and to what level. But knowing what our history has been, we may find that we have employees whose status may change because of a policy change. And we want to support our current employees. And we also want to ensure that we have a program in place to recruit employees and to live the town's values. And so what Paul and I have discussed is creating a program where we will, if someone finds themselves in that position, a current employee finds themselves in that position where they have to be consulting an attorney on short notice, that the town would have a program in place to provide assistance with that type of legal service. And those legal fees could rack up pretty quickly. And what we believe is a fair and I would say generous benefit would be to offer up to $5,000 for immigration assistance for the variety of compliance issues that may arise. And so our plan is, if the council supports this type of an idea, we would write it up and implement it now to give some certainty to employees that we may or may not have. And we would fund that out of the, we have a legal services line item in our employee services budget. And if funds were needed, we would fund it from there. But then for next year, we would identify a new line item and put a couple dollars in there. I think this is about positioning, that this is about telling our employees we value them. And that if they're faced with a difficult situation, that we will work with them and offer this benefit. So with that, I'll take any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Council, Councilmember Smith, you have your hand up. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for bringing this to us, Mr. Town Manager. I think this is incredibly important in the education sector. I've done some work around TPS issues during the previous administration of the next president, and the things that they were prevented from doing in the previous administration around TPS are horrific, and they have pledged to do them on day one. So in 40 some odd days from now, this could be a thing that people in our community, people in our employ could experience. So extremely grateful to see us supporting our community in this way. I'm wondering, Mr. Town Manager, if any of this benefit would apply to dependents of any individual who might be, in this position.
So it would be an employee benefit. If the council supports the concept, Mr. Smith and I would write up kind of a guidance paper, a little one pager. But I would think that much like our healthcare benefit, if it's for a legal spouse or a dependent, then that would be eligible as well.
Outstanding. Would love to see that and support it. And once again, thank you for bringing this to us. There are a lot of things I think that we're going to see over the next 40 years that, just simple, what seem like simple administrative things that are going to be leveraged to cause a lot of harm, and it's going to unfortunately impact folks in our community. So glad we are preparing to stand in solidarity with them as we look towards that administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Additional council comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Foe, go ahead.
I'd just like to reiterate the sentiments of my colleague. Anything we can do to employ in our own community and protect our employees is something that we have to consider. And this is just another excellent idea that shows the type of community that we are and that we strive to be, and then we look holistically at who we actually are and how these policies will impact our communities, our classrooms, our restaurants, everything that will be negative for how we want to grow moving forward. Anything that we can do, I will support. And this sentiment is who we truly are. So thank you, staff.
Thank you, Councilmember. Additional council comments, questions, discussion? Well, two people spoke very much in favor. I think that please move forward with this. And if any official council action is required, then we can do that in the next few months.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any public comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Keeping an eye on the clock. So, okay, let's keep moving. Next item is rules for the 54th Place Pocket Park and Tot Lot.
We have Mr. Newman Heater with us this evening, our special project coordinator. Newman, can you walk the council through this?
Yes, please. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'll be presenting as we know the park rules. No formal action is required at this time. Staff seeks input and feedback from Mayor and Council regarding the proposed rules for the 54th Place Pocket Park and Tot Lot. Just to provide an overview, the 54th Pocket Park and Tot Lot is in final stages of completion, with the permanent fence installation expected to be finished by December 18th. Staff in this regard have compiled proposed rules for the park to ensure it's safe, accessible, and enjoyable for all community members. The rules are based on the guidelines from MNC PPC Parks, Municipal National Park, Capital Park Commission. The rules are also taken from various online sources and town's priorities. Additionally, noting here that a video surveillance will be installed at the park's entrance. I'll keep it short, but I'll just go through each rule very quickly. Park hours will be dawn to dusk. Trash and recycling dispose all of the trash and recyclables in designated containers. Pets, no pets except for service animals will be allowed. Substance restrictions, no alcohol, smoking, or vaping permitted. Play equipment safety. Play equipment is designed for children aged 2 to 5 and 5 to 12 years. Children under 10 must be accompanied and supervised by an adult. Number 6, no climbing or playing on non-play structures. No loud music or amplified sounds. no bicycles, skateboards, scooters, or skating. No weapons, fireworks, and explosive or commercial activities are allowed. Keep personal belongings with you. The town is not responsible for lost and stolen items. Violations of these rules may result in penalties to include fines and removal or removal from the park and a potential ban from the park. Damaged equipment, report any damaged equipment or unsafe equipment to the town, and the numbers here. The next steps, staff seeks input from and feedback from the mayor and council on the proposed rules. Following the feedback, the rules will be refined and presented as a final draft for a formal approval. With this, I am open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter. Council members, questions, comments, thoughts? Looking awfully quiet. Councilmember Inyang, go ahead.
I think the rules make sense. I do think that we should be thoughtful in terms of how we display these. If it is a list of like 12, 13 things, it might either be ignored because it's like no one's going to read all that, or come off as like non-welcoming. And so, you know, if it's something where we can, you know, separate, I've seen, you know, certain rules like on the gate when you walk in, you know, like the timing, some other things, like, you know, I would just encourage staff to think about how this is displayed so it doesn't seem like, oh, there's this new park, but here are the like, you know, 14 things that you need to like comply with in order to be there. I know it's important to include, but just especially if they have to be in English and Spanish. So you know, just being like intentional about how the messages are conveyed would be important.
Yes, thank you for the suggestion. I think that's a good suggestion. These rules can be easily ignored if not presented well. So we'll definitely take that and make sure that, you know, we can come up with a good design when we are installing this these rules, a board or something.
Okay, any additional council comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Callahan, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to know if these rules apply to all the parks in Maryland.
So I would say not. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Mr. Hayter. Go ahead.
So yes, we reviewed the rules for different municipalities, and I would not say it applies to all of the municipalities, but yes, this is generally followed rules that we have looked up online or you know, through MNCCP and other municipalities. Just to name a few, so Greenbelt Park, for instance, requires adult supervision for children under 10 to minimize risk on play equipment. So that's one as a reference. And then Bladensburg Waterford Park, again, emphasizes adult preference for younger children to ensure safety play. So I would say, yeah, generally, these are the rules that are applied.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that you know, many parks, then for alcohol, I accept that is not good. Smoking, drugs is not good. But music, you know, some people, they are going there like baby naming or birthday or cookout, you know, they have to play music. But if there is no music, I think they cannot enjoy their outing. That's why I was trying to say. But all the other points that he brought before, I think I support you on that. So this is my own view.
Thank you for that feedback, Councilmember Callahan. I can say that when my children were small and we went to the parks a lot, that I had just the opposite effect, that very often if there was someone playing loud music, then my children wouldn't even wouldn't even cross the edge of the park, that they would want to leave and go somewhere else. They wanted to have somewhere that was quiet. And so it's an interesting question. It would be interesting to know if we could carve out a middle ground that would allow appropriate music, but not have it be too loud. I know that right now I still not during the winter so much, but regularly get calls from people who live near the park close to 51st Avenue because there's someone who drives their car in there, and I can hear the music from my house easily 10 blocks away. And so that's obviously also making that part of the park inaccessible. So let me discuss this with staff and see if we can perhaps carve out a middle ground there, a third way, rather than having a complete prohibition, have something. So,
Okay,
And,
that'll be nice.
and if I could just add here, City of Greenbelt does, for instance, prohibit amplified sounds, but without a permission. So you have to take permission before you could do something like that.
You know, why I'm saying this, you know, like the Spanish and the African people, when they make business at the park, they always play music.
mhm.
But if he said there is no music, it's gonna be a problem. You see, that's what I'm saying. You see, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
understood, and appreciate having a cultural perspective on that, because I understand that what you're saying is true. Any additional council input on these rules? Proposed rules? Any public comments? Okay, I have one sort of question on item 4. So those are restrictions on substances that you can consume on the site of the park itself. I would consider adding gummies to that list if it could possibly be enforced. But there's a question about what if people who are visibly intoxicated or under the influence arrive at the park, and is there any provision for that in these rules?
I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Well, not in the rules, Mr. Mayor, but if we can call upon Chief Turner.
Yes, sir.
Chief, if a person who's obviously intoxicated or under the influence of other substances is in a playground, do you have sufficient codes or statutes to remove that person from town property that's designed for a play area for children?
Not specifically. However, I feel like generally there are circumstances that surround that type of behavior that would probably lead to something that we could remove someone for. Generally, that resolves around some type of disorderly conduct.
And would it help you if we codified something that made that some sort of a prohibition?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Okay, it was just it was a question I had, and so if we can figure out a way to do that reasonably, then we should add that in. Other than that, the rules seem pretty reasonable to me. Interested to think about the noise control and how we might find a middle ground there. Any additional council or public comments on this before we move on to the next item? And Councilmember Lingua left towards the end of the discussion. He said that he had to depart, so he is no longer in the meeting. So let's move on to item 7, review of permit parking zones.
Chief Turner, can you walk us through this?
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. At the January 6th legislative meeting, staff requested mayor and council adopt a resolution to extend the existing parking permit zones for another 24 months. On January 9th of 2023, the mayor and council adopted resolution 2023-OR-01 to establish new parking zones in the town. Chapter 68 of the town code requires that the mayor and council review and, if applicable, extend the permit parking zones by resolution every 24 months. I spoke with our parking permit manager, Ms. Tracy Perrin, and she had no recommendation for changes or additions to the current zones. And is there any questions?
Thank you, Chief Turner. Council members, any questions or comments on the proposal to renew the existing parking zones as they exist now?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Councilmember Yang.
is there have we had, I guess what I'm curious on the feedback method in order about the parking zones. I know I appreciate the idea of it, having to review them every 2 years, but do we know if any residents have requested any changes or any additional parking zones? I know in my neighborhood, it was something that was talked about early on, and more recently, it's less so. But just curious, like, you know, if there's been any feedback that the town sort of received that we should be aware of before we authorize them.
If I could take a stab at this and then ask for the chief and Director Barnes to supplement. There's a process designed if residents would like a parking permit area. And Director Barnes, have we received any initiation of that process from anyone in town?
No, not that I'm aware of.
And have we gotten inquiries about what the process is and we shared that information, or?
We haven't gotten recent inquiries about that process actually at all. So I think when we first started this over a year ago, we had pretty extensive community discussions. And at that point, there seemed to be some interest, but we haven't had any additional requests since that time or any interest that I'm aware of.
And it's my understanding that if someone comes forward, then new areas can be added at any time. It doesn't have to wait till a subsequent renewal of the existing areas. And then the only other area that I'm aware of is we have a resident, or perhaps more than one resident, outside of a permit parking area that would like to park within that permitted area, and that's in your Madison Hill neighborhood. That's the only other one that I'm aware of.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of as well. And those type of conversations about like adjustments of the zones or slight tweaks, is that appropriate to have before sort of approval of the zones, or are you saying that that's something that could be raised at any point in time?
I'm saying that adding a zone, for example, if Riverdale Park Station wanted to have permit parking, they would have to follow that process, and that can be added at any time. In terms of changing the legislation to allow folks whose property does not front the street where there's permitted parking, to allow folks from a different street to be able to, or a different area, to be able to have permit parking on a town street, that I believe would at least be policy direction that we would need from the mayor and council. I would go so far as to think that it would need to be codified.
But that would not happen during this process.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
But if for instance, you wanted to add an additional block onto an existing parking zone, then could that be the time that we would do that, or add a few extra houses? Or is that also going to require separate legislative action?
If it's adding a new zone, I would think that could happen at any time. If we had something queued up, it could happen now.
Okay, I'm just imagining, so one of these is 5411 Powhatan Street. And so imagining that 5413 also wanted to, then would this be the appropriate venue for adjusting that, or do we need to go through a separate process?
No one's approached us.
Okay.
and people can approach us at any time.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Inyang?
Yes and no. I think I'm not sure the awareness of the process. I know residents have like reached out to the town in the particular case of Madison Hill neighborhood. And I think the understanding was that's a bigger change, or it had to be a more involved process. And so that's something that would need to be kind of thought through parallel to this. And that's the conversation I guess was worth having. But I think I understand what the town managers mentioned laid out though.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Please do.
Councilmember, are you wanting a separate discussion about changing the code requirements and how staff administer the permit parking, where it's a defined area and you have to be in that defined area to get a permit? Is that something that I'm understanding that you want to have a discussion on and we should research? Or
yeah, I think it's yes, to answer your question. I'm a believer that I understand, like I think the way it's written now makes sense for most cases, but in the event of these, we have just I think a kind of unique one-off situation. And so if it needs to be sort of codified specifically for a particular area, I don't think that's I think that with a stroke of the pen can sort of alleviate a lot of problems and issues. Is something to look into, and as opposed to a fear of sort of opening up a worm, a rabbit's nest or whatever. My analogies are off because it's late, but I don't think it's a slippery slope for all permit parking. And if it needs to be sort of like narrowly written, then I think it's something to at least think about and think through any of the potential possibilities if that's the case. But the overall spirit behind the process and the law makes total sense, and I think works for 95% of the time, all the time.
we certainly can add this to our list of things to look into and report back, sir.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just concur with my colleague from the Fourth Ward pretty much entirely. I think 19 out of 20 cases, this right here covers it, but I can think of one individually, one block in Ward 1 where it wouldn't, and having a zone rather than just block by block on a case by case basis would fix the problem. So in agreement there.
Okay. Then I guess staff will add that to the list of code changes to look at.
And in the meantime, Mr. Mayor, we'll come back in January to seek approval of this renewal of what exists. And so we're in compliance with the code, and then we'll come back with potential edits in the months ahead.
Very good. Thank you. Next item is item number 8, signs for political campaigns.
And you got me again. It's been I've done more talking tonight than at most meetings. So this is an item where I've worked to get some clarity. And so as laid out in the staff memo, in 23, a resolution was adopted relying upon what I call the previous zoning ordinance. And in that section, it appeared to give us broad latitude. There's a more specific section that that establishes some additional criteria. The new zoning ordinance maintains the more specific criteria for campaign signage and does away with, and I've confirmed this with the county, does away with the broad authority or seemingly broad authority that the town has to say, well, yes, you can put signs in our rights of way. And so it's a much more narrow and limited authority, and it cannot be for campaign signs. So whether staff agree or disagree of what the county ordinance is, that's not ours to take a position on. But these bulleted points in the center of the screen, Mr. Robinson, if you move that up to the center there, those 4 bulleted points is what's in the town code. And so I took that and I talked with Mr. Sussman and said, is this something that the town can waive on our rights of way, this, that, and the other? And that answer is no. So we have to comply with the county requirements. And if, as noted in the memo, if candidates for office are complying with the 10 feet from a street line, then the signs are not going to be in the town's rights of way. They're going to be yard signs. And so that's what the requirements are under the county's both previous and new zoning ordinance. As of April 1, because they're running, I haven't seen anything like this before. The initial response was, well, you can comply with either zoning ordinance, the previous one or the new one. But as of April 1, 2025, which is before the time period that the council previously allowed this, as of April 1, 2025, we won't have the authority to allow signs generally in our rights of way. One thing that we did in preparation for this agenda item was to go back and listen to the meeting from 2023. And part of the discussion focused on the observation, I'll call it, that we have low participation rates in the elections. And some folks don't know the elections are occurring. And how do we get the word out? And so I've met with Director Barnes. We've talked about the need for a public information campaign and how the town can engage its residents so folks know that you have to be registered or on the supplemental registry. Here's the dates of the election, and how are we getting that information into the hands of all of our residents who are eligible to vote, either supplementally or through the primary voter registry. And so Director Barnes is going to work with the Board of Elections on that informational campaign. And again, the staff aren't taking a position on what the restrictions are. We're just sharing with the council information from both the previous and the new.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Council questions, comments, thoughts? Any public questions, comments, or thoughts? Are we ready to move forward? Okay, it's 10:27, so I'm going to move us to our next agenda item. Updates from Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, budget public hearing testimony.
Director Barnes.
Good evening again, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. This item is just to provide some updates related to the public hearing testimony that the town sent in during the FY26 budget deliberations or conversations regarding Parks and Recreation budget. And these are great updates. It seemed like this year, maybe for the first time, Park and Planning was really deliberate about following up on very specific items that we included in our written testimony. One of those items was the Northeast Branch Trail, the bridge over Wells Run. So that bridge is scheduled to be replaced in June, and staff are working with Park and Planning and their contractor to minimize the impact of a closure of the Riverdale Road Bridge to replace the bridge over Wells Run. So a big crane is needed to take the bridge out and put the new bridge in. Unfortunately, this phase of the project will not resolve the concerns regarding the slope of the trail and access to Riverdale Road, but it's my understanding that there is a second project, but there's no specific timeline for that. So that is one update. The trail between Riverdale Road and Patterson Street is scheduled to be taken care of this year. So that's great news. Although we do try to pinpoint dates, and that was not something that anyone was super excited about, but we'll share more information as it becomes available. This item is probably the most exciting improvements at Riverside Neighborhood Park. So the long-awaited public restrooms are currently being renovated, and there will be some sort of anti-vandalism devices that are incorporated into the renovation plans. Again, a timeline wasn't shared necessarily, but staff are hopeful, of course, that they'll be in place by the springtime because there's lots of spring activities that occur at Riverside Neighborhood Park. One of the important things that staff learned in the conversations with Park and Planning staff is that the improved amenities and the frequency of maintenance at Riverside Neighborhood Park is based on the number of permits issued for use of the park. And unlike other parks in town, this is like a shared responsibility between the town and Park and Planning based on a 20-year-old MOU that still exists. So because of the shared approach and the uncertain status of the fields, I think we've talked about this many, many times, there were very few permits that had been issued. And although neighboring property owners, and in fact, Councilman Lingua often reports that the park is frequently in use for pickup games as well as more organized games. So winding this down, part of the discussion with Park and Planning was how to handle the permitting for Riverside Neighborhood Park. The rules and requirements have changed substantially over the last 20 years, and to ensure consistency and proper permitting, staff are recommending that Park and Planning administer the permits for Riverside Neighborhood Park. And that would be a change to the process that we currently, or that was in place historically. And then last but not least, it sounds like Park and Planning is very open to the renaming of the parks in town. And it's a very simple process that would just require a letter to the director. They recommended utilizing cross streets, the names of cross streets, to help with identifying the specific parks in town. They also mentioned that there are some specific, there's some specifications related to commemorations. So if we wanted to name the park after somebody, we'd have to go through a pretty extensive process, but it seemed like naming the parks after the cross streets would be a pretty simple process. So those are a few updates that came out of the written testimony that the town provided for the budget public hearing.
Thank you, Director Barnes, for that report. Council members, questions, comments, thoughts? Councilmember Inyang, I see your microphone is
Yes.
hot.
Thank you for the readout. I think it's great to hear about the path from Patterson Street and us trying to hold them accountable for a particular due date. I believe I was told for the last few years that there was money in the budget and it was going to be done. So it's good to hear, but you know, I'll believe it when I see them start to, you know, put some shovels in the ground. But hopefully it happens this year for sure. And I'm surprised that she responded on the naming of parks. That's good to hear. And I'll have to think about. I don't know the cross streets of that actually would work well, but at least there's a path, and it's something worthwhile to look into. I don't know if they provided any information on what the process would be for like the commemoration path. I'm sure it's extensive, but would be good to sort of have that on file as well. But thank you so much. Appreciate the update.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Similarly interested in the memorial process, understanding the cross streets thought, you know, for locating it. But I think, you know, there will be cases where we'd want to memorialize, you know, prominent individuals or historic individuals from town with parks. I'm particularly thinking of Riverdale Park or Riverdale Neighborhood Park, this is exhibiting why we need to talk about changing the names. Riverdale Neighborhood Park. I think it would be incredibly appropriate to rename that particular facility Lynn Bias Memorial Park. So interested to know more about what the process is there.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any additional council discussion? Any public comments or questions? I think it's great. This is great that we're getting information from them about our requests, feedback in this very specific way. It's great news. So, and I'm glad to see a lot of these projects moving forward. So thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, last, well, there's minutes down there, but which is important. Next item, appointments to the Board of Elections and Ethics Commission.
Good evening again, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. This is really a housekeeping item. So as we're all aware, there were some vacancies on the Board of Elections, one for a regular member, one for a youth member. Staff worked with the current Board of Elections and really tried to find volunteers to help us out to fill this one vacancy. And we solicited volunteers for a variety of ways. And Terry Archsmith expressed interest in serving and filling the vacancy of the Board of Elections, and staff then worked with Town Attorney Sussman to draft the resolution that's attached. So we're trying to move all the resolutions or all the appointments to resolutions. This will be the first resolution, and we will still have a vacancy for the youth member. We do have some plans on how to find somebody to fill that vacancy, but we were really pleased to find Terry, who has also been a town election judge and a county election judge in the past. So Mayor Thompson was gracious enough to allow us to put this on the agenda, and he's interested in appointing Terry to the committee. And so we went ahead and drafted that resolution. So the resolution is attached for that item. And then the members of the Ethics Commission, their terms recently expired, and they have staggered terms. They have all expressed interest in continuing to serve. They've done a great job over the years, and staff worked with the town attorney again to draft this attached resolution to reappoint the members of the Ethics Commission. So the Ethics Commission is 2 members and an alternate that need to be reappointed. There is another member that their term is perfectly fine, doesn't need anything, but it is restated in the resolution in order to for historical purposes and record keeping purposes.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Council comments, questions, thoughts?
Fully in support of it. And Terry's awesome.
Any additional comments or thoughts? So one question that I have is the 2-year appointment for Terry. That's going to put her out of sync with the other members on the board. Is that, do we need to do that, or can we have her term expire at the same time as the other members?
I can check with the town attorney, but because the the way the Board of Elections works is that they serve until a replacement is found. So I think that was why it's a little bit different, because we do have somebody who's stepping away from the board. But I can talk with the town attorney to see if any adjustments could be made. It's really hard with these, and I'm sure this is what you're alluding to, Mayor Thompson. It's hard when all of these expiration dates, if you will, and these terms are staggered and they're all throughout the year. It makes it tough.
Right. If we could at least think about how to line them up, so have her appointed in 2026 if she wishes to continue, of course. Then aligning them at that point would be a good idea.
Yep. Sounds great.
So please ask the town attorney for guidance on that.
Certainly.
That's my only question. Any additional council or public comments on this public discussion of this item? Okay, item 11 is minutes. This is where you go down in history. So make sure that Director Barnes didn't got all the commas in the right place and all the ways you want to be remembered when someone is reviewing your testimony in 3 years or 5 years or 50 years. Then the minutes are where that will happen. So please review them carefully. That brings us to unfinished business. Councilmember Smith requested that 6615, status of 6615, be discussed at this time. 6615 was included in the hotly negotiated National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, which, as I understand it, passed out of the House about 5 or 6 days ago, and passed a procedural hurdle in the Senate this afternoon. And I believe, knock on wood, I think I have some pieces of wood nearby, that it will be voted on by the Senate tomorrow. So things are looking very good, because a lot of work has been put into place to get to this point in the process. But as a cautious person, then I'm not counting on it until the NDAA is actually signed by President Biden. And we will see when that happens. And then, of course, there's the process post passage of the bill, that we have an administrative process, and the fact that the NDAA says that the Secretary of the Army, I believe, may transfer the property to us. Mr. Town Manager, did I miss any details on the status?
I think that's a good synopsis, sir.
Okay. Councilmember Smith, any additional questions or thoughts?
No, sir. Appreciate the update, and here's my knock.
Okay. And believe me, when things actually get signed, we're going to have an event. We're already thinking about exactly how to commemorate that day. So we will be reaching out to the highest levels of state government and our federal representatives to have some exciting event. Are there any other items of unfinished business? Are there any items of new business? Well, it's not even 11 o'clock, but let's call it a night and get as much sleep as we can. I got an early morning for me tomorrow morning. So thank you all. Appreciate the discussion and thoughts this evening. See you soon. See you in the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.